with verse number 1 here. Paul writing, of course, to the church of the Thessalonians. And he writes and he says, "For yourselves, brethren, know our entrance in unto you, that it was not in vain. But even after that we had suffered before, and were shamefully entreated, as you know, at Philippi, we were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God with much contention. For our exhortation was not of deceit, nor of uncleanness, nor in guile, but as we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, which trieth our hearts. For neither at any time used we flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak of covetousness, God is witness, nor of men sought we glory, neither of you, nor yet of others, when we might have been burdensome as the apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because ye were dear unto us. For ye remember, brethren, our labor and travail, for laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you, we preach unto you the gospel of God." As we come here this morning to this particular chapter and this particular portion of the scriptures today, we find Paul is writing here to the church at Thessalonica, and Paul has a special place for them in his heart, and he says some very important things here in the first part of this epistle. Over here in chapter number 1, verse number 7, he says a very important thing about him. He says, "So that you were examples to all that believe in Macedonia and Achaia." So Paul here says this about the church at Thessalonica. He says, you guys were examples to all them that believe around you, that you had an influence that extended beyond, just your town and just your city and just your place. And as we look at that this morning, and with the context in chapter number 2, and put those thoughts together, I want to give you just a little bit of a thought this morning on pursuing intently a powerful intellect. So Paul here says this about this church. He says, you were examples, not only to you, but to all that was surrounding you and all that was around you. And I think today when we read that, we have to think about this aspect, that wherever it is that we go in life and wherever it is that we find ourselves, we're influencing other people. Now, tomorrow, you're going to go to your job and you're going to clock in, or you're going to badge in, or you're going to do something. You're going to walk through the doors and you're going to influence all those people that are around you. They're going to know you. They're going to see you, and you're going to be an influence upon them in your neighborhood and in your family, in your circle of friends, whatever it is. We have this influence that is out there. And Paul says this about this church: you were examples to those that were around you. Let me ask you something. If somebody said, how do I act and how do I behave as a Christian? Can we say, just follow me? I'll show you. I'll give you, exactly what it is that you need to do, because this world today needs some examples, and they need something that they can follow, and they need something that they can go after. And here's what I've learned in my aging state. If I'm going to have to reassemble something, I take pictures of it before I disassemble it. I've got to get some photographic evidence. This is what it looked like before I took it apart. That way I know what it's supposed to look like when it goes back together. Because I don't remember anything anymore. And here's what I've learned in life. When you take something apart and you put it back together and you got spare parts, something ain't right. When there's washers and bolts and screws and other kinds of things, it's not right. Now, what I have learned, when you buy something new from the store, it might have some extra parts in it. But if you take it apart and you put it back together, I say that to say, I need an example. I need something that I can follow, and something that I can make a little bit of a pattern by. And it's amazing to me. We've got a couple of little 3D printers at work. And I can take something that's broken and use it as a pattern and be able to print things. And I've printed all kinds of goofy little things that I've used at home, and it's amazing to me. The windshield wiper motor in Daddy's 34, all the gears in that thing now is 3D printed there at work. And I was able to take just a broken gear in there and be able to make a pattern from it to print what was right. I said that to say this: you might not be 100% perfect, but you can still be an example. You can still be used. And Paul here, to the church at Thessalonica, he says you were examples to all them that were around you. So we see here, pursuing intently a powerful intellect. Now, what does the word intellect mean? The word intellect means it's the power of knowing rather than feeling. There have been plenty of times I felt something was right, and I hoped it was right. And I put plenty of things back together that I really hoped when I pressed the go button, it didn't explode, that it didn't go from, a single piece into a bunch of pieces. But intellect is knowing rather than feeling. So how do we get there? How do we be this example, and how do we have this knowing rather than feeling something? And I believe chapter number 2 gives us the steps and the process that we need to see. Now, 7 things I want to show you out of these 9 verses this morning, and help us pray that we can get it out to you the way that God gave us to us. So pursuing intently a powerful intellect. How are we going to do that? The first thing I want you to notice, the important thing in that is verse number 1. We see there's a positive impact. Notice what verse number 1 of chapter 2 tells us. For yourselves, brethren, know our entrance unto you, that it was not in vain. And here Paul says, here's what we did. We made a positive impact on you. Our entrance, when we came to you, when we come into the city of Thessalonica, when we made our entrance into your city, we made sure that there was a positive impact that was there. And here's what we ought to strive to do. Wherever we go and whatever we touch and wherever it is that we find ourselves at, here should be our desire, that we make a positive impact on that situation, on that person, on that workplace, on that neighborhood, at Walmart or whatever. We should be praying that we make that positive impact. And Paul says that here to the people at Thessalonica. He says, when we came to you, you know it wasn't in vain. How many people say this about us, that they are benefited by our presence and saddened by our absence? It's a positive impact. You've made a positive impact today. Just showing up today, you were able to make a positive impact, because you're more fun to preach to than this songbook right here. You are. You made a positive impact. Now, nobody did anything grand or nobody did anything glorious, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, but you made a positive impact today. And here, Paul says that you know this about us. Now, we're talking about pursuing intently this powerful intellect, and Paul says we want to know that we're doing the right thing. He says, brethren, you know this, that our entrance in unto you, that it was not in vain, that some good came of it, that something good came out of it, that our presence there was good for you. And here's what I found in life, and me and Vicki will be going somewhere, and she'll usually say this. Now, you got to do all the talking because I don't know what to say. And here's what I found in life. That sometimes it's not the words that matter, it's your presence that matters. The words are just kind of, nobody remembers the words anyway. Nobody does. But you remember this, that person was there. You probably don't remember anything that they said. They probably don't. Now, when your dad passed away, we come to the house. Do you remember that? Do you remember what we talked about? Exactly. Just being there sometimes is all that's needed. And making that positive impact on people and letting them know is extremely important. Paul says here in verse number 1, we're talking about, having this pursuit intently. He says we need to have a positive impact. Not only do we see a positive impact in verse number 1, but we see a persecuting instance here in verse number 2, in the first part. He says, but even after that we had suffered before and were shamefully entreated, as you know, at Philippi. This verse right here is 100% the thing that we need to use when people say, well, I'm not going to church anymore because I went to church over there and they treated me badly. Paul says, we came to Thessalonica and we preached unto you the gospel, and we came, and our presence was not in vain, that we done something good. But you know what? That crowd at Philippi didn't treat us right. That's what he says, right? You know that. You know that we came unto you. You know that there was a persecuting instance that was out there. You know that there was a time that something didn't go quite right. But even after we had suffered before, and were shamefully entreated, as you know, at Philippi. I promise you this, there's not a person in Carroll County, Surrey County, Northwest, North Carolina, Southwest Virginia, there's nobody around us that's been treated as bad in church as the Apostle Paul. Not a single one of us. Now, does that mean that it always happens the way we want it to? Absolutely not. Does that mean that somebody doesn't ruffle your feathers? Does that mean that somebody doesn't say something that you know is a little mean-spirited or you know doesn't exactly come out the way that they intended it to? Sometimes we get like negative comments. We could tell Jeff, you know, man, your hair really looks good for somebody that's got that much gray. Now he can take that offensive, right? I didn't mean it offensive, but he might take it offensive. And I promise you this, every single one of us has walked out the doors of this church and somebody said something to us and it upset us a little bit. That don't mean we don't come back. Paul says, we came to you after they treated us bad over there. After we were mistreated at Philippi, we're talking about a persecuting instance here. He says, even after we'd suffered, we were shamefully entreated at Philippi. And Paul says this, even though they treated us badly, we were still willing to come to Thessalonica. And here's what I've learned in life. Not everybody's out to get you. Some people, you know, might be, but not everybody's out to get us. And Paul says here, even though we were treated bad somewhere else, and here's how we have that powerful, intellect, and here's how we have that pursuing intent. Here's what we do. When things don't go our way, you know what we do? We just keep on going anyway. We just keep going exactly the way that we're going to do. Mousy was out here pulling weeds today. Norma didn't like that. That's not going to stop Mousy from pulling weeds out. She's just going to keep right going, right? She's going to keep smiling. She's just going to keep going. And you know what? She's even going to get people in on it sometimes. What happens when we're mistreated? We just keep going. What's happened when other people talk about us? We just keep going. What happens when it don't always go our way? We just keep going. This isn't Burger King. You don't get it your way. And here we see that Paul says that there's a persecuting instance that was out there, that it didn't go their way in Philippi, that it started off good, but you know, they were cast in prison. They were treated in a bad way and not treated in the right way. But Paul says that didn't stop us from pursuing. That didn't stop us from going on. That one instance didn't stop us from doing what was right. We see a persecuting instance here, but not only that, we see a persistent influence in the latter part of this verse. He said, we were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God with much contention. There's a persistent influence here. Paul says we come to Thessalonica. We'd left Philippi. They treated us bad. We come to Thessalonica, there's still contention that is there. It didn't, it wasn't all, rainbows and unicorns and things go the way that they wanted it to. And Paul says, but we were able to do this, but we were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God. Now, we're bold about lots of things sometimes. We have strong opinions on things sometimes. How come it is that we don't have strong opinions on the things of God, though? Those should be strong opinions to us, and there's certain things that I still have strong opinions on. I still believe in this book right here, and I was talking to a guy at work the other day, and he said, what version do you use? I said, well, I only use one. I use the King James Bible. Well, why? I happen to know why. Because it is from the purest manuscript. It's from the Textus Receptus. The other manuscripts, Textus Vicanatus, Textus Sinaiticus, those are not as pure manuscript. This comes from the purest manuscript. This is what I use. And he said this, well, I'm not as dogmatic on that as I used to be. Well, I still am. I've not changed that. I have no plans to change. I'm 52, almost 53 years old. There's no reason for me to change my mind on this now, right? There's no reason to. And we should be bold in those things, and we should stand firm in those things, and we should stand fast in those things. And Paul says here, we were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God with much contention. Even though people were opposing us, even though things hadn't went our way, and for the Apostle Paul, life wasn't always easy, and things, he didn't stroll into town and they built tabernacles and they welcomed him in with open arms and, had dinners and things like that for him. They didn't take the preacher out to eat on Sunday for Apostle Paul. It didn't go that way. Most of the time, every situation he went into was contention and strife. And you know what Paul did? He just kept on preaching anyway. And here's what he preached. He preached the gospel. He said, this is what we gave you. This is what we delivered. We delivered unto you the gospel of God. We had this persistent influence that we were always willing to talk to you about the things of God, that we were always, we were bold in our speech towards you. We were bold in the things that we were teaching. We were bold in the things that we believed. We were bold in the things that we were following. We were willing to stick to those things. So we see a persistent influence here in the second part of verse number 2. And then as we get into verse number 3, we see a pure integrity. He says, for our exhortation was not of deceit, nor of uncleanness, nor in guile. There's a pure integrity that was there. Paul said, when we came unto you, our exhortation, our speech, the things that we were trying to teach you, here's what it was. It wasn't of deceit. We weren't trying to get one over on you. We weren't trying to confuse you. We weren't trying to lead you in the wrong path, and we weren't trying to lead you in the wrong way. We weren't trying to do things in a deceitful manner to do that. He said, nor of uncleanness, nor in guile. The way that we presented ourselves and the way that we presented the gospel and the way that we talked about things was in the right manner and in the right way. Why is that so important? Because we have a world filled today with people that just are out to get you. They don't care. There are churches today, they'll say whatever they need to say to fill the pews. And that's the only thing they care about is filling. Now, granted, if you ask me today, if I had my desire, we would have chairs down the aisle, we'd have people standing at the windows. That's what I would like to see. I really would. But what we can't do is compromise the gospel to be able to accomplish that. We have to stick with what the Word of God has to say. And Paul says here, we did this in purity. We weren't doing it in deceit. We weren't doing it out of uncleanness. We weren't doing it out of guile. We were making sure that there was a pure integrity in there. And here's what we have to understand, that the integrity that we have in this walk of life is important. People see it, and people notice it. And people know, what you say versus what you do. And people understand that you may preach that you need to do this, and if you don't do that, then they're able to see that. And Paul says here that we made sure that our exhortation, it had no deceit, it had no uncleanness, it had no guile in it, there was no ill content in it. It was exactly what it was that it was supposed to be. Now there's coming a time that I either depart from this place and go somewhere else and do something else, or I die. One of those two things is going to happen eventually, right? It's inevitable. And when it's all said and done, I only want one thing to be said. And you don't have to have, a great big funeral, and you don't have to, have all kinds of weeping and sobbing and all those guys. You don't have to do all that. But I hope when it's all said and done, you say, well, he told us the truth. And that's really all I want. Do I want the pews filled? Absolutely. We sure do. And it's not for, and we'll see this here in a second, it's not for, our own glory. We want to take as many people to heaven with us as we can, right? That's what we want to do. But we want to make sure that when it's all said and done, that we're willing to tell the truth and to stand on the truth and to have integrity and to have this, have this said about us. And Paul says here, you know this, that our exhortation, it wasn't deceitful, it wasn't unclean, it wasn't in guile, but we were following the right path. We see a pure integrity. Not only that, verse number 4, and you notice we see a pleasing instruction. He says, but as we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God which trieth our hearts. Paul says here, we were given this opportunity, we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel. I don't think we can ever really fathom what that really means. That the gospel was taken and handed to us and said, here, go present that and take care of that. Now, something very valuable, we want to make sure that we put it in the right hands, right? This is my corporate card. I can't believe the limit that they give me on this. It just blows my mind. I could buy a car and run off to Mexico. But they entrust me with this, right? It would be foolish if while we were up at Lake Ridge, and here's our card. I don't know what we need to do with that. Put that up somewhere. It would be foolish of me while we were at the campground to give this to Clay and say, run over there to the store and buy me a Fanta. Now, I don't know about you. I'm not giving a 9-year-old my corporate card and putting him on the golf cart and sending him to the store. I like him. I don't trust him that much, right? One, he probably wouldn't make it from the camper to the golf cart with the card. It's probably gone somewhere. And he really thought that he was going to get a driving lesson and he was going to be driving the golf cart before we left. But Nana and Papa don't do those things, right? Not till he's old enough. But I can't turn that over to a 9-year-old. But think about this. What is the most important story that this world has ever known? It's the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the most important story that this world has ever known. And he gave it to Steve Combs and said, here, go protect this. He gave it to us. He presented it to Jeff Melton and said, here you go. This is your responsibility now. This is up to you to guard and to watch over. We see here, Paul says, we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel. That God trusted us with the gospel, and because God trusted us with the gospel, and here's the important point, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, which trieth our hearts. And here's what we have to understand. Why is it that when we present the gospel, we want to make sure that we're pleasing God and not pleasing man? For this, because God gave us the gospel, not man. Man didn't give you the gospel to go present. God gave us the gospel to go present. God is the one that presented us with the gospel. And like we talked about a few weeks ago when Jesus and the disciples were out on the sea and it was storming, and he said before that, we're going to go to the other side. They're not going to go to the other side because John was in the boat. They're not going to the other side because Peter was in the boat. They're not going to the other side because any of the other 10 were in the boat. They were going to the other side because Jesus was in the boat. And why do we have this gospel? We have this gospel because God gave it to us to present. Now, if we go back to the history of this building, and we ought to be so grateful and so thankful that somewhere along the line, somebody decided this needed to be a church. And we ought to be so thankful, and like Brother Wayne talked about, we ought to be so proud and so thankful for that heritage. I'm glad that somebody, somewhere along the line says, you know what, we're going to make this building into a church. But it's not because of them we have the gospel. It's because of them we have this building. But it's not because of them we have the gospel. It's because of God that we have the gospel. And here, Paul says, because God gave us the gospel, we're talking about a pleasing instruction. He says, because God gave us the gospel, when we present it, we don't want to please men, but we want to please God. Because here's what I know, and like Brother Jeff alluded to this morning already, there are times that the things I want to say don't make it in the right manner, don't get on the pad, and my brain gets in the way sometimes. But I believe this. I believe that I have a decent ability to be able to present the scriptures. But I know this, that God can take that away just like that. He could strike me down in the middle of this aisle right now. He could strip me of the ability to understand what His Word says. Just like that. I don't want to please man, I want to please God. Because He's the one that gave us the Word. He's the one that gives us the ability. He's the one that gives us the intelligence. He's the one that gives us the understanding. He's the one that provides all of that for us. And we see here that Paul says there's a pleasing instruction there, and we want to make sure that we're pleasing God and we're not pleasing men. There's also a personal impression in verse number 5 and 6. Believe me, the last 5 go quicker than the first 5. He says, "For neither at any time used we flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak of covetousness, God is witness, nor of men sought we glory, neither of you, nor yet of ourselves, when we might have been burdensome as the apostles of Christ." We see here a personal impression that Paul made. He says, "For neither at any time used we flattering words." Paul's a very intelligent man. And you've probably been in this situation as well. I've been somewhere where I wanted to go hear somebody intelligent speak, And it would probably do you well to go hear somebody intelligent to speak sometimes too. But Paul says, we didn't use flattering words. I went somewhere because this person was well known or, regionally famous or something like that. And I wanted to hear them. Now, I didn't understand any of it. I didn't get anything out of it. Because it went whoop. I'm still just a dumb redneck from Surrey County, and I need simple things. I need plain things, right? Paul says here, we didn't use flattering words. Paul's desire was never to walk out of the sanctuary, out of the tabernacle, out of the tent, off the street, wherever, and people say, "Man, that guy's smart. That guy's sharp." That was not Paul's intent. He said, we didn't use flattering words. Paul could have. Paul says we didn't use flattering words. We didn't want to, seem intelligent in that way. He says, you know that we didn't do that. We didn't use a cloak of covetousness. God is witness. We didn't come in that kind of manner. He says, but we didn't do this. We're talking about having this personal impression. He says, nor of men sought we glory. Believe me when I say this. There is nothing wrong for when this service ends and we all depart. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you patting Brother Jeff on the back and saying, "That was a good Sunday school lesson today." There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing. It is wrong if that's what he wants. Let me say it again. There's nothing wrong with you doing that. There's nothing wrong with you shaking his hand, hugging his neck, and all of those things. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Where it is wrong if that's what he wanted out of that. And Paul says here, we came to you in this manner. We didn't use big fancy words, and we didn't show you that we had some fancy book learning and all of that. Paul didn't say we wanted you to understand how smart we were and that we know everything and you know nothing and you better listen to us because we know what the truth is and you don't. Paul says we didn't come to you in that way. Nor of men sought we glory, nor of you, nor any others. That's not the reason that we came. When you deal with people sometimes, you find out really who they kind of are. There was a group not long ago I reached out to about coming for homecoming. And this is what they pretty much said. "Oh, we don't do those little churches anymore. We need about $5,000 to be able to come." And their suggestion was that we get together with other little churches around us and we have a big joint service together and be able to get them the money together, right? This is people that I've heard in a little church before, but they don't do that now. They've advanced, right? They've grown up from that. That's not their forte. Here's what I believe. If somebody called me this afternoon and said, "We're going to have a service tonight at our church and I'm the only one that's going to be there, would you come?" I'd still go. If there's one person that is there, the right thing to do is still go present the gospel. I had a friend of mine not too long ago. He said, "I've got an invitation to go preach at a church and it's this denomination. And I don't know, I know they don't believe like us. What should I do?" I said, "You should go preach." If they called me from a Catholic church and said, will you come next Sunday and deliver Mass, I'd find somebody to sub, because I'd go. They'd hear something they never heard before. But I'd go. Well, that's not your denomination. So, Paul says here, we went out. We didn't try to impress you. We didn't try to seek glory. We didn't try to get big offerings and donations. He said, this is what we did. We made sure that we didn't seek your glory. We didn't seek the glory of others when we might have been burdensome. He says, we didn't do that. We acted as the apostles of Christ. Paul says, we made sure that we left a personal impression upon you. Lastly, verse 7 through 9, I want to show you this. There's a parenting interest that is here. He says, but we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you not only the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because ye were dear unto us. Paul says, when we came unto you, we didn't use big words. We didn't seek approval. We didn't want to get so many likes and so many shares and all that. He says, we came to you, we presented you the gospel. And he tells us why and in what manner. But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. We were affectionate towards you. We were willing to have imparted unto you not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls. Here's what Paul said. When we came to you, our intent was to deliver unto you the gospel that God gave us. He said that multiple times in this section. But then he goes on to say, but we also wanted to leave a little bit of us with you. Here's probably what you don't understand. Every time you leave, you take a little piece of me with you. Why? Notice what Paul says here. Because ye were dear unto us. Why do we give a piece of ourselves? Because the people that we're presenting it to mean something to us. It's not a job. It's not an occupation. It's what we do because we care about the people that we're delivering it to and giving it to. Paul says here, we didn't want to just leave unto you the gospel of God only, but also our own souls. We wanted to leave some of us there in Thessalonica because you were dear unto us. And I certainly hope that, you know, in the future, if I depart from this place, I hope I get the opportunity like Brother Wayne did to come back and preach a homecoming. I think that's insanely cool that we were able to do that. Because that doesn't happen very often. Because here's what happens in most cases when a pastor resigns, oh, that guy's mud, and we don't have anything to do with him anymore. That's what happens most of the time. But we were able to have that person come back. Why? Because you're dear to him. When he left here, he left a part of his soul here. It's in these pews. When you leave here, you know, if you something happens and you pass away, there's parts of Geneva and Clifford that are still sitting here. It's still here. Are they physically here? No. But that doesn't mean that there's not part of Clifford and Geneva that's still here. That doesn't mean there's not parts of Warren and Jesse that's still here. That doesn't mean that there's not, not parts of Joe that's still here. That is still here. And Paul says here, we cared about you so much. We left part of ourself there. He says in verse 9 in closing, he says, for you remember, brethren, our labor and travail. You know what we did. For laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you, we preached unto you the gospel of God. Paul says, you know that we came in and we told you the truth. You know that we came in and give you exactly what it is that God gave us to give you in that day and in that hour and in that time. And because of that, we didn't want to be chargeable. We didn't want you to be able to say that we didn't give you the Word of God. Paul looked over the church at Thessalonica just like a parent or grandparent looks over their kid. We were eating breakfast yesterday morning at the campground, and Vicky got up and fixed sausage patties and pancakes. Great big old piles of pancakes. Well, we kind of get going into it, right, a little bit. And the stack is diminishing. And I'm still hungry, right? But you know what we do? We make sure Clay and Layla has all the pancakes they want. And I'll eat the rest of it. I don't care what it is. I'll eat the rest of it. But I don't want to eat it first. I got my one pancake and then a second pancake, piece of sausage, then a second piece of sausage. But I'm eyeing that plate, right? As soon as they're done, I'm really going to get started. I don't really start till they've decided that they're done. Because here's what we don't want to happen. That little kid say, "Are there any pancakes left?" Now, that could have happened. We would have rectified it. I'd have told Vicky, "You got to get the stuff back out. You got to make more pancakes, right? These kids are hungry." But we want to make sure that they're taken care of. Pursuing intently a powerful intellect, knowing rather than believing or feeling. Paul says here's some things that we can do that help us know. When we do that, we can leave this influence. We can leave this testament behind. We can be examples. When we want to be an example, then if we can follow these 7 things right here, we can be that example. Paul said to the church at Thessalonica, you were examples to all those that believe in Macedonia. We may not have a huge stage, but we have the stage that we do have. And every person that you come in contact with, they need that example. We talked about today, that billboard on 52 that says Jesus is not God, and it made me angry, it made me sad, and Jeff said something about wanting to cut it down or something. I thought about getting some kerosene, dousing in kerosene, lighting it on fire. That's what I thought about. But why would somebody put that up? Probably because they never had the right example. They had an example, and that's what they're following. But they probably never had the right example. And that's probably why their thinking is skewed. And that's probably why they don't know the truth. And here's what we need to know today, that this world needs some examples. And I can't find a better place for them to get it than right here.